Thank you, Nishta. I will give you much more praise at the end of our sessions here, but none of this would be possible without your organization as well as that from the MRC. And obviously, Dr. Das, we owe all of you an immense debt. But good morning from a very unfall-like Washington, D.C. I guess the tensions of the election have actually bled into the climate. It's unusually warm for this time of year. Um, Obviously, Washington is obsessive compulsive right now with the forthcoming 2024 election. India went through this process earlier this year, so we all know what happens in large democracies when the election season is upon us. There's a lot of silliness that goes on. Um, but we're here to actually talk about something that is decidedly not related to an election, decidedly not related to something that is related to a political communication aspect, something that is really core not only to traditional security considerations, but also um, a long-term stability of our ecosystems, of global trade, essentially contemporary civilization to a large extent. And that is the health of the global commons, the health of the maritime spaces, and how the underwater aspect of that domain is disproportionately kind of a new frontier. It offers substantial potential wealth for countries to exploit, to protect. It represents a new space with due to technology of greater considerations on a whole host of traditional and non-traditional security threats. And it also deals with essentially a lot of the ways in which we communicate contemporarily, given the presence of undersea cables and the connectivity of our globe. Um, but my many thanks to all of you, wherever you're joining from, whether it be here in the morning in Washington or in the evening in India or anywhere else around the globe. Um, the NISA Center, just for sake of background, we are technically called the Near East South Asia Center for Strategic Studies. We are one of six United States Department of Defense regional centers. The two largest of our sister centers are the Marshall Center, which is located in Garmisch, Germany, and the Asia Pacific Center for Security Studies, which is based in Honolulu, Hawaii. NISA is one of three that are located on the campus of the National Defense University in Washington, D.C. And we cover what you could broadly call, or what I would call, I think Chuck, my colleague from NISA, would also agree with this, the Indian Ocean Rim. A lot of my colleagues say that we cover Central South Asia and the Middle East. But for Chuck and myself, who think from a water mindset, we cover the Indian Ocean Rim. Um, we don't use the entire title because we are Americans. We don't want to use four words when we can just use one. So therefore, we always just make it called NISA. It's far easier for us to get through that. But from our kind of mission statement, what we do, if any of you are not familiar, is NISA is charged by the Office of the Secretary of Defense, as well as other components of the United States Department of Defense, to run engagements with key partners and allies throughout our area of responsibility on traditional and non-traditional security issues. In essence, what we do is have sessions like this, bringing together scholars to do three primary things. One is to learn, to get smarter. So I can tell you from the jump, the conversation today, I'm most interested in learning from all of you, either through questions and comments, through the speakers themselves and their expertise, and also modeling out potential future engagements. That's number one, always on our list. Number two is ways that we can help inform our stakeholders inside the U.S. government on how to enhance U.S. policy, how to get better, how to be better, more responsive to partners, how to redirect current focuses on particular issues. And third is to do a horizon scan, um, to essentially look forward down the kind of the pathway, so to speak, given that all of us who are in this room who have been in government service or have worked at the kind of cutting edge of technology or business know that people who are in the trenches, so to speak, do not have time. They respond to crises continuously. They bounce from one problem set to the next. Those of us in this room currently, we often have the luxury of a little bit more time, and so we can think through things a little bit longer and help those that are in the trenches pop their head up occasionally and get a sense of what's north, south, east, and west. Um, but that's a quick background on NISA, and we're happy to be partnered with the MRC for this inaugural event between our two centers, and hopefully the cooperation will continue going forward. As for my remarks, I will not try to belabor it because I know that honestly, Dr. Das can give far more comprehensive introduction than I ever could. Um, but the kind of inspiration, at least from NISA's mindset for this cooperative event and for the conversation we're about to have, is premised initially on the U.S. from the U.S. mindset, the Indo-Pacific concept. It has become the epicenter of global geoeconomics, of geopolitics, of geostrategic concerns. Obviously, we all know that the specter of U.S.-China competition, as well as China-India competition, lingers over the Indo-Pacific. In some ways, that competitive relationship can be a positive. It has spurred technological innovation. It has spurred uh, kind of diversification of aspects of the global supply chain. But it also brings with it tensions and concerns, especially by smaller regional states that are worried about flashpoints, who are worried about competition becoming conflict. The U.S. is intent on making sure that that does not happen. Um, and we do so through our kind of traditional methodology of relying on partners and allies. And obviously, the US India bilateral relationship has kind of gone into warp drive over the last few decades, given what it was, say, in the late 90s to what it is today, has been immense. And still to this day in Washington, it's a sign of great pride for the amount of people on both sides of that relationship and how much investment has been levied. Um, Returning to the Indo-Pacific from the U.S. mindset, the Indo-Pacific is largely a region defined by its waters, and as a result, the challenges of those waters um, is a way a lot of the tensions play out. We have the issues of protection or protecting ecosystems, which cover everything from illegal fishing to illegal dumping to biomass degradation to coastal erosion, a whole host of complex problem sets. Um, but then you have things that are more advanced and more traditional in their nature, essentially expansive sovereignty claims, specifically in the South China Sea, increasing tensions, aggressive actions between different countries in the waters of the East China Sea, near the Taiwan Strait and the South China Sea. Um, in the midst of it, the United States and other like-minded actors, including India, are doing what they can to protect the freedom of navigation so that these waters are not defined by their conflict, but remain conduits of trade and exchange, but also standing firm for the established rules and norms of the international system, just like India does, often more routinely in the Indian Ocean than the Pacific, but those connective waters, the challenge sets are spreading quickly, and we all know that. Um, so for NISA specifically, what we have fixated on is a lot of the issues when it comes to the maritime domain and the waters of the Indo-Pacific um, is is related to a lack of awareness. And I don't mean awareness in the sense of a military mindset, awareness in terms of a lot of policymakers, a lot of civilian leaders, a lot of people who are leaders in the private sector don't know the extent in which minor changes of the way things work at sea has tremendous catastrophic domino effect. I mean, we've seen it in certain points where the entire world realized this. The blockage of the Suez, for instance, the Ukraine Russia war, and how that has disrupted trade into the Baltic as well as the Black Sea, tensions in the South China Sea, and how they have increased cost. And then most recently, the attacks in the Red Sea by the Houthi, and how that has disrupted global trade, massively increased the cost of shipping commodities globally, changed kind of new tensions that exist on our kind of global supply chain, and inspired an increase in armed robbery at sea and even acts of piracy as a result of these disruptions. So awareness is one thing that the NISA Center really fixates on, and what we could call maritime domain awareness, which started as a disproportionately state conceived idea, and very much tied to security forces of those states, so coast guards, navies, other constabularies. But increasingly, the concept of maritime domain awareness has become more expansive because there are more stakeholders involved. You have non-governmental organizations that are involved in domain awareness. You have international organizations like the UN or the International Seabed Authority, or IORA, or ASEAN, and others that are helping seek to define kind of awareness, but also the tools in which we use to spread awareness are immensely changing. It is no longer a world in which, if you are a captain of a vessel or you are a fisherman setting out to sea for the morning's catch, where you're just relying on your immediate information that you can see and what you can detect by your own vessel's equipment. We are no longer in a drought of data. We're exact opposite. We have a flood of data. We have a deluge of data, where everything from satellite imagery to sensor buoys, to different forms of artificial intelligence or machine learning tools that can fuse various data streams together, to predictive modeling that can even project potential future hotspots based on historical trends and their accumulation. All of these things have kind of exploded onto the scene. They're not really necessarily wrapped up into a singular form yet. Obviously, in India, you have the Indian Ocean Region Information Fusion Center, based just outside of Delhi. You have obviously the Information Fusion Center in Singapore, that have been models on state facilitated conversations, but there's a whole host of non-governmental actors that are using free to use data, using information from the European Space Agency, from NASA, from NOAA here in the United States, that are really shaping how we conceive of the seas, both the air above the seas and the surface of our seas. But this gets us to today's conversation, which is the underwater domain. That same kind of technological and technical innovation is happening when it comes to the underwater domain. Is far more delayed than what we saw over the last several decades when it came to the surface. There is, for lack of using a pun, the dark waters beneath the surface remain very dark to a whole host of people, both policymakers and governments, but also people who, in either a direct or indirect way, have to explore or understand that area for their own economic or political or social purpose. We still, to this day, it's the kind of undiscovered and unknown domain. And so how do we do that? How do we set up standards to protect the underwater space? How do we provide clarity, share information on it? What is a no-go? What is where we should put our emphasis? All of these things are being mapped out now in conversations such as this. So we do know that the underwater domain has a whole host of geopolitical concerns attached to it. So even those who approach it from merely a scientific or an exploratory mechanism are also getting tied into political conversations. These things are very, very complicated, also very, very interesting. And the rules are being written and kind of agreed upon as we go. It's exciting, but it also comes with a lot of risk. So just to return to kind of my initial opening statement is we're just very thankful to be partnered in this effort, and more importantly, we're really looking forward to learning from everyone here gathered, their mindsets, their perspectives, their inputs. So with that, my thanks to you. I will jump back on to moderate the first session, but I think I turn it over to Dr. Das. But good morning once again here in Washington.